On the night of July 6th, Ukraine said it carried out one of its largest drone operations of the summer, striking 47 military targets deep behind Russian lines. That number immediately attracts attention. But the more important story is not how many targets were hit. It is why those particular targets were chosen. According to Ukraine, the operation did not focus on tanks or Russian units fighting on the front line. Instead, the reported target list ranged from fuel tankers sailing across the Sea of Azov and a fuel storage facility in Kirch, to a Nebo-U long-range surveillance radar and S-400 air defense launchers. Viewed one by one, each strike may seem like a routine military attack. But when these targets are placed together, they reveal a different picture. According to Commander Robert Brovdy, this force carried out about 1.65 million combat missions, launched around 350,000 strikes, and caused more than 100,000 Russian casualties. If Ukraine's claims are confirmed, this operation may reflect a broader trend. Kyiv is not only trying to damage Russian forces on the battlefield, it also appears to be increasing pressure on the logistics and air defense network that supports Russian military operations in Crimea and southern Ukraine. That raises another important question. Among the 47 reported targets, why were the 2 fuel tankers in the Sea of Azov mentioned first? Were they simply transport vessels, or do they play a much larger role in Russia's supply network to Crimea? Let's find out with military force. Sometimes failure means spending more troops, more shells, more missiles, and more armored vehicles, but still not changing the map in a decisive way. That is the problem Russia appears to be facing. That number matters because it points to more than one isolated attack. A single drone strike can damage one vehicle, one depot, or one radar site. But 47 targets suggest a wider operation, planned across several locations and aimed at several parts of Russia's military system at the same time. The real aim was to force Ukraine into a wider defensive crisis, stretch Ukrainian brigades, weaken supply routes, and make Kyiv react to Russian pressure instead of setting its own pace. These are not random targets. They belong to the rear area network that allows Russian forces to keep moving, keep storing supplies, and keep defending important military sites from the air. That target list is important because it shows Ukraine looking beyond the nearest trench or vehicle. This is why the operation deserves attention. Ukraine has used drones near the front line for a long time, especially against trenches, vehicles, artillery, and small troop movements. But this kind of operation shows a broader use of unmanned systems. Drones are no longer only battlefield weapons looking for targets a few kilometers away. The deeper issue is that Ukrainian drones are becoming tools for striking military infrastructure before it reaches the front. For Russia, that creates a different kind of problem. A tank or an infantry unit can be replaced in one sector, but a rear area network is harder to protect when many points are under pressure at once. Fuel has to move, depots have to operate, radar has to watch the sky, air defense systems have to stay ready. If drones can threaten several of those links in one night, Russia may need to spend more forces, more equipment, and more attention protecting the areas behind its own lines. This can slow decisions, spread defenses thinner, and make routine supply work more dangerous. If commanders must hide, move, and communicate constant drone threat, the campaign becomes harder to control. This is what unmanned systems forces, also known as USF or SBS, became a symbol of the shift. But even as a claimed operation, the target list shows the direction of Ukraine's campaign. The message is not only that drones can fly far, the larger message is that Ukraine is trying to make Russia's rear area less comfortable, less predictable, and more expensive to defend. Reconnaissance, target selection, strike teams, and command decisions began to work as parts of one system. That matters because Russia's advantage has often been mass. Among the 47 reported targets, 2 fuel tankers sailing across the Sea of Azov stand out because they represent something every military force depends on, but rarely attracts public attention. The deeper aim was to make Russian combat power arrive at the front weaker than when it left the rear. This is why the spring campaign should be judged carefully. Russia was not defeated in one clean moment. Ukraine said each tanker was carrying around 7,000 tons of fuel. That makes them more than simple transport vessels. They were moving a heavy military resource toward one of Russia's most important rear areas. And to understand why that exposure became so costly, we have to look at the numbers reported by the commander of Ukraine's drone force. Fuel is one of the foundations of every modern army. Tanks cannot move without it. Military trucks cannot deliver ammunition. Generators cannot supply electricity to command posts. Radar units, air defense systems, engineering vehicles, repair crews, and port equipment also need a steady supply to keep operating. This is why Ukraine appears to have selected these vessels. Destroying combat equipment can reduce Russia's strength in one place. Interrupting fuel deliveries can affect many units at the same time. A shipment does not need to disappear completely to create pressure. Even a partial delay can force commanders to change delivery schedules, move fuel from other locations, reduce daily consumption, or protect remaining stocks more carefully. The pressure is not only physical, it also forces planners to think about what might be hit next, where fuel should be stored, and how much risk each movement now carries. The route itself is important. The Sea of Azov gives Russia a direct connection between its southern territory and Crimea. Supplies moving from the Taganrog area can reach the peninsula without using longer ground routes, which makes this maritime link useful for routine military support. Ukraine says this drone force hit 248 Russian systems, 817 tanks, and 1,379 armored vehicles. Reported 4,890 artillery systems, 342 self-propelled guns, and 281 multiple launch rocket systems destroyed or disabled. The list continued with 26,430 logistics vehicles, plus many Russian reconnaissance drones and launch positions. Those categories tell a larger story. Air defense vehicles protect the rear. Russia may need to strengthen patrols, monitor shipping routes more closely, divide cargo into smaller loads, or accept slower movement through routes that are more difficult to manage. The key point is that Ukraine is not only waiting for fuel to reach storage sites. The reported strike suggests an effort to pressure the supply chain while fuel is still moving. That is important because moving fuel is difficult to hide. Tankers follow routes. Ports have patterns. Deliveries require planning, crews, timing, and coordination. Once those movements become vulnerable, Russia may need to change sailing times, add more protection, or use less efficient routes. These steps do not always look dramatic, but they consume manpower, equipment, and time. In a long war, small delays can build into larger operational friction. This is the pressure Ukraine appears to be seeking. Not every strike has to destroy an entire supply system. Some strikes are designed to force caution, create delays, and make ordinary movement feel unsafe. Over time, that can change how Russia plans even routine logistics. Even if the full damage remains unclear, the choice of target shows the logic of Ukraine's campaign. The aim is to make Russian logistics less smooth before supplies reach Crimea. But fuel is vulnerable not only while it is moving across the Sea of Azov. Once it enters storage facilities, it can become another important target for long-range drone operations. Ukraine also said a fuel storage facility in Kirch caught fire after the overnight drone operation. Images shared on social media appeared to show flames in the area, but the full scale of the damage still needs independent confirmation. Ukraine's real drone advantage is not only the number of aircraft in the sky, but the way those aircraft are organized into a battlefield system. That is the difference between a weapon and a method of war. In a war zone, early footage often shows the most dramatic moment, not the full operational result. Still, the reported location makes the incident important. This was not just a fire at an isolated site. Kirch sits inside a wider supply environment where fuel, transport links, port activity, and military infrastructure all connect. Kirch is not an ordinary location. It sits near one of the most important connection points between Russia and Crimea. Roads, rail links, port activity, and military supply routes all make this area valuable for Moscow. Because of that, a strike near Kirch carries more weight than a fire at a remote storage site. The area is close to the wider zone around the Kirch Bridge, which remains one of the most important links between Russia and the peninsula. For Moscow, keeping this corridor reliable is essential because Crimea supports military activity across the southern theater. Supplies arriving through this area can continue toward military bases, maintenance facilities, logistics centers, air defense positions, and other important locations. A disruption near Kirch does not automatically stop those movements, but it can force planners to review schedules and increase protection. The reported target fits the wider pattern of the operation. If fuel tankers represent supplies still moving toward Crimea, a fuel depot represents the next stage of the same chain. It is where deliveries can be stored, organized, and later sent to bases, vehicles, generators, repair sites, and other military facilities. This makes storage sites important, even when they are far from the front line. They are not dramatic targets like tanks, but they decide whether the machines of war can keep running. A depot fire can create several problems at once. The first is the possible loss of fuel. The second is disruption. If its route is understood, the strike team can wait for the moment when the vehicle slows, turns, stops, or enters open ground. The attack does not have to happen at the first sighting. The third problem is emergency response. Fire crews, technical teams, security units, and possibly air defense assets may need to be pulled toward the site. That response consumes time, manpower, and equipment. It is not enough to hide the weapon. The crew must also hide movement, supply, radio use, and repeated habits. This is where drone warfare becomes more than flying cameras and small explosives. If one depot is damaged or closed, even temporarily, Russia may need to reroute fuel, use another facility, or slow distribution until the system is stable again. This does not mean one fire can paralyze Russia's forces in Crimea. A large military network normally has reserves and backup options. But the purpose of this pressure is to make normal work harder, slower, and more expensive. If Ukraine's claim is confirmed, the Kirch fire would show that fuel is vulnerable not only on the water, but also after it enters storage. To protect these routes and fuel sites, Russia needs strong air defense coverage. And according to Ukraine, that protective layer was also hit during the same overnight operation. Ukraine also said it destroyed 2 S-400 Triumph launchers during the same overnight operation, with one reported in occupied Crimea and another in Russia's Bryansk region. This part of the claim is important because it moves the story from fuel logistics to the systems Russia uses to protect its rear areas. Ukraine reported the destruction of S-400 launchers, not necessarily full S-400 batteries. A complete S-400 system can include radar vehicles, command equipment, launchers, support vehicles, and missiles. Losing a launcher does not automatically mean the entire system is gone. But that does not make the loss meaningless. A launcher is the part that carries and fires the missiles. If one is destroyed, the local system may have fewer missiles ready to launch at that moment. The S-400 is one of Russia's most important long-range air defense systems. It is designed to protect high-value areas against aircraft, drones, and missiles. In Crimea and other rear zones, systems like this can help defend airfields, command posts, bridges, logistics hubs, radar sites, ammunition depots, and fuel infrastructure. That is why the reported S-400 strikes matter in the wider operation. Ukraine was not only targeting fuel on the move or fuel in storage, it was also targeting the shield around those assets. A fuel depot is more exposed if the air defense layer around it is weakened. A supply route becomes harder to protect if Russia has to move or replace launchers after a strike. Bryansk adds another layer to the story. Unlike Crimea, Bryansk sits inside Russia and has been used as part of Moscow's wider military rear. A reported strike there would show that Ukraine is looking beyond one battlefield zone. For Russia, this creates a resource problem. Long-range air defense systems are not simple equipment that can be replaced overnight. They require trained crews, protected positions, radar support, command links, and careful coordination. If launchers are destroyed or forced to move, Russia may need to choose which sites receive stronger protection and which areas accept more risk. This is where the strike becomes more than a loss of hardware. It can affect how Russia organizes defense across its rear. This also matters for future attacks. If Russia must move S-400 launchers more often, crews may have less time to prepare strong positions, connect support systems, and maintain stable coverage over key rear areas. The psychological effect also matters. Air defense is supposed to make rear areas feel safer. If drones can reach launchers that are meant to defend key sites, then the rear no longer feels fully protected. That can force commanders to spread systems wider, hide them better, or move them more often. Still, the claim should be treated carefully until confirmed by independent evidence. Battlefield reports can overstate damage, and air defense equipment can be misidentified in early footage. But even with caution, the target choice is clear. Ukraine appears to be attacking not only supplies, but also the weapons meant to defend those supplies. But air defense is not only about missiles ready to fire. It also depends on radar systems that can detect threats early enough for launchers to respond. Ukraine also said a Nebo-U long-range surveillance radar near Kirch was among the targets hit during the same overnight operation. This is why the expanding kill zone is so important. It blurs the old line between combat area and support area. A place that was once considered behind the battle can now become part. That is where radar becomes essential. A radar like Nebo-U helps watch the airspace and identify incoming objects from a distance. It can support the wider air defense network by giving early warning and helping commanders understand where a threat may be coming from. In simple terms, radar gives the defense network time, and time is often the difference between reacting early and reacting too late. If the S-400 launcher is the weapon that fires, the radar is part of the system that helps it see. One gives Russia the ability to strike targets in the air. The other helps find those targets before they arrive. This is why the reported location is important. Kirch sits near a major gateway into Crimea, and Russia needs strong air surveillance around this area. Drones, missiles, and aircraft do not only threaten frontline positions. They can threaten ports, bridges, storage sites, command areas, and air defense units inside the rear. A radar loss can also create a temporary information gap. Russia may still have other sensors and backup systems, but losing or moving one major radar can affect coverage, especially in a sensitive area like Kirch. It may also force other systems to carry more of the workload, which can stretch the network during future attacks. When Ukraine claims to have hit both S-400 launchers and a Nebo-U radar in the same operation, the pattern becomes clearer. The target list suggests pressure on more than one layer of Russian defense. A faster army can turn information into damage while the enemy is still exposed. This is where Ukraine's Delta system also matters. Delta helps connect battlefield information, drone feeds, maps, target reports, and unit decisions into a shared picture. Commanders may need to reposition other systems, rely on different detection tools, or accept weaker awareness in some directions. Crews may have less warning before a drone or missile arrives. Other radar units may have to cover a wider area. This is why the strike matters beyond the radar itself. It can affect how Russia connects detection, command, and response across Crimea's rear area. A weaker radar picture can make every later decision harder. Again, the claim still needs independent confirmation. But as part of the reported operation, the Nebo-U target fits the larger logic. Ukraine appears to be attacking the eyes of Russian defense, not only the weapons that fire. When these targets are placed together, the operation no longer looks like a set of separate explosions. It looks like pressure on the wider rear area system that supports Russia's war. Taken together, the reported targets point to a clear pattern. Ukraine was not only striking separate objects on a map. The targets belong to Russia's logistics and air defense network, including supply vessels, fuel storage, surveillance radar, and S-400 launchers. Fighting near the front line, but they help keep the war running. Fuel allows vehicles and generators to work. Storage sites keep supplies ready for later use. Radar helps watch the sky. Air defense launchers protect important military areas from attack. That is why the campaign matters for Crimea. The peninsula is not only a symbol for Moscow. It is also a rear base, a supply platform, and a military hub for Russian operations in the south. If Ukraine can make Crimea harder to supply and harder to protect, then Russia may have to spend more resources just to keep the area functioning. Russia can still repair damaged sites, replace lost equipment, and shift supplies through other routes. But every adjustment has a cost. A new route may take longer. A replacement system may need trained crews. A repair depot may operate more slowly. Extra protection may also pull air defense assets away from other locations. That matters because Russia has to defend many sites at once, from Crimea to border regions and deeper rear areas. This is how pressure builds in a long war. It does not always arrive as one decisive blow. It can come through repeated strikes that force the opponent to spend more time, more fuel, more manpower, and more attention on basic rear area work. The timing also matters. Ukraine's reported operation took place on the same night Russia launched a large air attack against Ukraine. That shows how both sides are expanding long-range warfare. Russia is trying to strike Ukrainian cities, infrastructure, and defense capacity. Ukraine is trying to hit the logistics and protection systems that support Russian military activity. In this kind of war, the rear is no longer far from danger. Ports, depots, radar sites, supply routes, and air defense positions can all become part of the battlefield. So the meaning of this operation is not only found in the number 47. It is found in the long-term pressure Ukraine is trying to place on the way Russia keeps its war machine supplied, protected, and ready to fight. If Ukraine's claims are confirmed, the July 6th operation would show that Crimea and the Sea of Azov route are no longer fully safe rear areas for Russia. The value of the strike is found in the combination of targets. Fuel keeps the war moving. Storage sites keep supplies ready. Radar gives warning. S-400 launchers help protect the network from the air. Together, these systems support Russia's ability to operate beyond the front line. Russia may still move supplies, repair damage, and shift equipment to new positions. But it may have to do so under greater risk, with more protection, more planning, and less confidence than before. In a long war, that difference matters. Forcing an opponent to spend more resources behind the front can weaken the speed, timing, and strength of later operations on the battlefield. Behind every battlefield report are real people affected by war, so our goal is to understand conflict clearly while remembering the value of peace. If you found this analysis useful, please like this video, subscribe to Military Force, and turn on notifications for more clear reports on weapons, battles, and geopolitics. Thank you for watching, stay informed, and we will see you in the next report.